It's about what you have on them in order to protect yourself.
I was first raped violently.
Well, you're finished. You'll never play football again.
Obviously, shoe contracts worth $400,000 or $500,000.
Morals and ethics don't exist above and beyond the society that they're a part of.
Nowadays, kids are faced with the choice of do you want a couple $1 million or your college degree?
Sport is a metaphor for what goes on in the real world.
Sports associations, such as the National Collegiate Athletic Association, play a major role in promoting and managing competitive college sports. The dominance of the NCAA provides it with virtual monopoly powers on certain aspects of college sports, and as the dominant force in collegiate athletics, the NCAA receives its fair share of criticism. Does the NCAA advocate for the student athletes that are under their control? Or do they advocate for the interests of their member colleges and universities? Do they advocate for the betterment of the particular sports that they manage? Or do they advocate for all of these interests, as some believe? At the summit, the first international conference on ethics in sport, the NCAA's management of collegiate sports came under scrutiny, and NCAA representatives defended the NCAA's actions. Let's revisit the summit and consider the ethics and management issues associated with sports associations in general and the NCAA in particular.
I think it has to be understood that we have a very bad system. The NCAA, I refer to it as NCAA, National Conspiracy Against Athletes. Now, a tremendous amount of money, I would say nothing less than a publicity juggernaut worth $1 billion, is aimed at the public every day, trying to convince them that the people involved with the NCAA have the interests of the athlete at heart anytime they make a decision. Yesterday in one of the sessions, Steve Horton asked the question of anyone on our panel. He said, can anyone name me just one time when the interests of the universities and the athletes have diverged, in which the athletes' interests won out? And the simple answer was, I said immediately, no. Even when he looked to the NCAA representative, the guy couldn't point to a single time. And yet the overriding effort of all the publicity that goes out there across the country in a million different ways, from the coach to the athletic director and all the way up to the actual advertisements that come on TV for anti-drug or anti-smoking or anti-alcohol or drinking and driving. Behind all this is the idea that everybody's doing everything they can for these young people. We have a lot of sanctimonious, self-righteous people who are making one claim, and yet I think that the evidence is absolutely compelling that every decision that's made regarding the NCAA is to help the institutions. Most of the time, the institutions don't get involved in any kind of activity or any kind of decision that involves the athletes until they have a public relations nightmare on their hands.
Most of those are situations where you don't need a rule book to know that a rule has been violated. Specific examples include a head men's basketball coach who, during the recruiting process, offered specific prospects, money upon arrival at the institution, money and then also monthly stipends or monthly payments while they were competing for the institution. And he would get that money directly in cash upon arrival, and then also, in instances, would send cash either via UPS or Federal Express to the parents of the student athlete, so it would avoid direct payment to the student. Clearly, significant rule violations where the coach knew in advance that he was violating NCAA rules, was specifically inducing an individual during the recruitment process to come to that institution. And when I say, talking about dollar amounts, it was $10,000 to enroll, and then $5,000 a month during enrollment. So it totaled a fair amount of money.
I work in the area of gambling and sports agents. Sometimes they go hand in hand, sometimes they don't, but both cut to the integrity of the game, frankly, in the end, and they also cut to the personal integrity and the personal safety of our student athletes. So I think it's kind of an interesting two topics to deal with. So many times it seems like the NCAA is perceived as being against or not hand in hand with our student athletes, which isn't true. But certainly in these two issues of gambling and agents, we're all in this together, and we're trying to help them through these two issues. We believe they're naive in this area and can use additional information so they can make wise decisions.
Situation at hand involves director of athletics at the institution setting up an outside bank account, and when checks were being sent to the university in care of the athletics department, we're taking those checks for a 7-year period, took over 100 checks, and deposited those checks in an outside account in the name of the athletics department. State University Athletics Department signed off as director of athletics. Took that money, commingled it with other money that he had also procured, took that money and spent it in a variety of ways, arguably for the betterment or to supplement the budget of the athletic department. Fundamental issue is, did the school violate the principles of institutional control? Did they have an adequate monitoring system to detect or prevent that director of athletics from misappropriating those checks and depositing those into an outside account? Institution has said no. We believe we had adequate monitoring measures in place, that there's no way to detect an individual who has the specific intent to circumvent university policies and NCAA rules. We have countered with that by saying that we believe there should have been some system in place. When the checks came into your university, somehow they should have been logged in independent of the director of athletics, whether it be the individual, the administrative assistant who logs in those checks, whether it be someone from the business office in athletics, or even someone from central administration as a matter of policy who receives all the checks and then disperses revenues appropriately. So those are one of the fundamental issues as an example of where the principles of institutional control have been applied. Also issues of ethical conduct. If you look at this case, one would be the issue of institutional control. The fallout issue, as it involves the director of athletics, is his individual culpability. As an administrator in an NCAA school, did he violate the principles of ethical conduct? And there's specific legislation on the books regarding individuals' behavior and whether they've provided false or misleading information, have been knowingly involved in an NCAA rule violation, have refused to cooperate with an NCAA investigation. Those areas fall under the umbrella of ethical conduct.
Any college player in the last 20 years that's gone to college that truly had an aspiration to make the NBA or the NFL, these players were forced to sign a document before they entered college saying that they were pursuing sports strictly as an avocation. That not only were they now limited to 20 hours a week of practice, but they have to make the claim that that's all they really want to spend anyway because they're there primarily as a student. I think it's a terrible thing that an athlete has to lie before he enters college, and that's what's a terrible thing about the whole NCAA structure. They have a death grip on pre-professional basketball and football, and they won't give it up. They won't invite General Motors to field a team in the Pac-10 or the Big Ten, a team of people who clearly are not college students. They won't do the things they do for all their other students, saying, well, we'll provide night school for you. You can come only at night, or you can take just one course per semester or 2 courses per semester. No, for public relations purposes, they have to pretend that their athletes are students first. So they all have to take a full course load and be on track for a 4 or 5 year degree.
What's very interesting, for a very long time I thought there would be no change in college sports, but there recently has been a number of lawsuits that have really changed things quite dramatically. There was a very recent lawsuit where a number of coaches sued the NCAA. It's this restrictive earnings dispute in the early 90s as I don't think the NCAA really wanted to end the financial problems in college sports, but coming out of the 1980s, there was a sort of a great deal of criticism from many authorities about corruption in college sports, and there were a number of commissions. Congress was investigating it. Representative Tom McMillan, who had been a college athlete, Senator Bill Bradley were investigating it. I know I testified a couple of times. And there was it was called the Knight Commission, the Knight Ridder newspaper chain. Their foundation set up a commission to investigate it, and Father Hesburgh of Notre Dame was one of the co-chairmen, a man named Friday from North Carolina. And one of their recommendations was to get control of this financial stuff. And so the NCAA did it kind of by fiat and in a very marginal way. What they said was, you know, coaches could have these staffs, like in football, of 13, 14 assistant coaches, but a couple of the guys at the end of the food chain, the younger assistants, could only be paid, say, $12,000 to $15,000. And they argued that, you know, we are an academic institution, and this is amateur athletics. And the English department, for instance, I mean, our teaching assistants, who are graduate students, are paid $5,000, $6,000. And we argue that, well, this is part of their education. They're learning to teach. They're not only learning to be researchers and such. So the NCAA argued this. And a group of these coaches got together and got lawyers and sued them and said, no, you're not an amateur organization. You're a professional sports organization. The market should prevail. It should be market prices. You do not have the right to set this limit. And what was very interesting to me, they won in the lower courts. And then it went to a federal court just this past spring. And a jury of just sort of 12 ordinary citizens found for the coaches. But the really important point here is that 12 ordinary citizens did not buy the NCAA's argument that big-time college sports was amateur athletics, was educational. They bought the plaintiff's argument that this is a huge commercial entertainment enterprise, and therefore you had no business to restrict these coaches' earnings under the guise of education and amateurism.
And so it's important to us to protect the integrity of the game. And frankly, from a financial standpoint, it's important. Our institutions have mammoth budgets. A significant number of them run in the red. They need television money. The NCAA has a sound contract with CBS for the men's basketball and women's basketball tournament. And certainly if the games weren't square, then television wouldn't be interested. But we have a comfortability level that the games that are being played are square, and from time to time they are at risk. But we have a close relationship with law enforcement and encourage the FBI's involvement in review of this, and anything we can do to assist them, we do.
But really, when you're talking about the NCAA, I think first and foremost you have to realize that Rich Hillier doesn't make the rules and regulations concerning intercollegiate athletics. I think there's a great misunderstanding of what the NCAA is. The NCAA is a nonprofit. It's a private association of 933 colleges and universities throughout the United States of America. Founded in 1906 and originally put together to regulate intercollegiate athletics. There are three divisions, Division I, Division II, and Division III. And they formulate rules and regulations as it concerns financial aid, recruiting, benefits to student athletes, championships, things associated with the regulation of college athletics. And I want to emphasize again that I don't make up the rules. My responsibility is to monitor those situations where schools violate the rules that they've already established. And it really concerns the intentional rule violators, where you don't need a 435-page book to realize that a rule has been violated. It gets in sort of the ethical considerations that we're addressing here at this conference, is that when coaches, athletic administrators, student athletes, prospective student athletes are involved in intentional rule violations, that's my job responsibility. When a school is trying to obtain a competitive advantage in some system within their university, has broken down to either identify, detect, or monitor rule violations. Either someone has intentionally violated university policy, someone has intentionally circumvented NCAA rules in hopes of inducing a recruit to go to your college or to provide an extra benefit for a student athlete to stay at that institution. And that's where I get involved.
In many ways, the NCAA may be the subject of criticism because of its success. The lucrative broadcast contracts negotiated by the NCAA for college sports provides a large capital budget for the NCAA to pursue their own or their members' interests. Those who disagree with the NCAA have a difficult task when they challenge NCAA policies. Dick DeVenzio, author of Rip Off You, The Exploitation of College Athletes, and former first-team academic All-American point guard from Duke, argues that the NCAA works to exploit athletes, not protect them. He believes that the NCAA has a death grip on pre-professional basketball and football, and it pursues its own interests over that of the athlete. Professor Murray Sperber, author of College Sports, Inc., The Athletic Department versus the University, argues that recent lawsuits may change the power of the NCAA and the way college sports is managed. One recent decision ruled that collegiate sports is more entertainment than education and overturned the NCAA's rule which limited the pay of assistant coaches to that of teaching assistants. Bill Saum, NCAA representative for agents in gambling, knows there are many good reasons why the NCAA works to protect athletes. One of the good reasons is that the games must be fair or the networks will not renew their lucrative broadcast contracts. Richard Hilliard, Director of Enforcement for the NCAA, reminds us that he just enforces the rules set by the 933 NCAA member institutions. He does not write the rules. He confronts those schools which try to gain advantages over other schools through violation of NCAA rules. When rule violations are alleged, the NCAA enforcement procedures are a process which allows for additional evidence and repeated appeals. What policy changes in the NCAA would be in the best interest of the student athletes? What are the values, important consequences, and duties of the NCAA regarding their management of college athletics? How does the NCAA see their role in ethically managing college sports?
And so, in a sense, you've got to look at the NCAA as, in many ways, these rules were written by coaches and athletic directors, and it's a trade association for their interests. I mean, athletic directors want their empires to be as big as possible. They want as many coaches under them. The NCAA wants as many coaches as possible employed. And you've got to ask yourself whether this is in the interest of the universities that belong to the NCAA, or is it basically in the self-interest of the people who run the NCAA and really control it? And it seems to me very much, the latter.
You got to understand the NCAA, I think, in the context of the way we look at our churches. We love to criticize the church, the preacher, the fundraising, the building committee, the grounds committee, the Sunday school committee, but we forget that we are the church. So the NCAA is us. It's not some monolithic creation that fell out of the sky in 1924. It is us. I mean, it's X number of schools who get together and pick some people to be our staff and to execute our principles and our governing ideals, and we are it. So, I mean, we need to be involved, and we're looking for solutions rather than being critical of the larger body.
I played for a coaching staff that later was determined to have violated rules, and I knew that at the time that they were about winning at all costs. You know what? I learned a tremendous amount from that too. When I set out and became an NCAA investigator and then went on to become a commissioner, that experience, that negative experience, taught me how I want to do it the right way and how I want student athletes to gain an appreciation of higher education in the right format and the right way. And we talk a lot about the negative things, and I appreciate the history that Professor Sperber has talked about here about the NCAA. I think much of it was corrupt, like much of mankind's history has been corrupt. But we are where we are now, and we need to look forward to what we're going to do from this point.
To me, we have to make it clear what we're talking about in the NCAA, because I endorse heartily the Division III model where there aren't athletic scholarships, and I think it's a great way to do college sports. But when we're talking about the NCAA today, most of what people are interested in, the public, probably you, and what I'm going to be referring to is the coalition of major college schools that have a death grip on pre-professional basketball and football, and therefore are the #1 exploiters of athletes. Now again, to say the NCAA is exploiting athletes, to a lot of people they're given wonderful gifts. Room, board, books, tuition at a school like Duke is worth maybe $30,000 a year. If you're a female basketball player bringing in maybe $500 or $800 of revenue per game, that's a wonderful gift to get a $30,000 scholarship. If you're a basketball player bringing in millions, you know, the equation changes. But I'd like you to keep these two simple statements in mind. I believe that athletes should be treated like all other American citizens, period. Don't treat them better, don't treat them worse. The NCAA doesn't do that, but we can get into that. And the second, that universities should be in the business of educating students. That's what they're supposed to do. Now, if they choose to run multi-million-dollar entertainment enterprises, they can do that, but then they have to be real careful of the hypocrisy that has been rampant within the NCAA.
But I think that we are making a difference in this issue of gambling and sports agents. I believe it's an area where our athletes are naive, our general public is naive, our athletic administrators are naive, and they want help. They're starving for information. The NCAA has allowed this position, and more specifically myself, the opportunity to give these people the information that they hunger for, and it's a very fulfilling job. I think we're behind. It's in regards to where we should be.
If you talk to NCAA people, and I'm talking again mostly about athletic directors at major college schools, they will tell you that the scourge of college athletics are agents. Agents, and I would be quick to say agents are the athletes' best friends. They're the people that are trying to give athletes things. Universities are the people that are trying so hard in so many ways to keep athletes from getting anything. And as I said, I don't think anybody has the right, particularly somebody running an educational institution, to suppress anyone's economic opportunity.
When I tell them what I do, or after I've completed a case, say, you know, Rich, I wouldn't want to do what you do. And that's fine, but having a legal training, when I was in law school, a lot of people wanted to become sports lawyers. That always meant being an agent. I had absolutely no desire to be an agent. Being a former student athlete, I had an appreciation for college athletics, a love for college athletics. This was an opportunity for me to apply my legal background, my legal skills, my legal training in an environment with college athletes. And hopefully I'm making a contribution towards bettering the system, particularly those individuals who are knowingly trying to obtain a competitive advantage. If I can set the record straight, then I feel I am doing a service to the member schools who are doing it the right way.
The NCAA faces ethics and management challenges in several respects. NCAA rules and enforcement are in question. Publicity surrounding certain NCAA enforcement actions have brought charges of inadequate and selective enforcement of what has been referred to as poorly crafted and inflexible rules. Bill Curry, Chief Operating Officer for the National Consortium on Academics and Sport, former college coach and professional athlete, emphasizes that the NCAA is an association of colleges and universities, and as such, the colleges and universities have an obligation to take the steps necessary to improve the system. Professor Sperber believes that history shows that the NCAA only takes action after a public relations problem is created. He argues that most NCAA actions are money-motivated, not student-athlete or sports-centered actions, and that their operating values should be changed. Dan Beebe, commissioner of the Ohio Valley Conference, argues that the NCAA's past and present problems are less important than plans to make the NCAA better in the future. Dick DeVenzio believes that the NCAA is the #1 exploiter of athletes. He describes how some athletes are treated unfairly and how many NCAA rules work to the disadvantage of the athlete. He asks that athletes be treated the same as other students and that the NCAA should not suppress economic opportunities for athletes while they are in college. Bill Saum responds that he takes pride in making a difference in collegiate sports by keeping the games fair and the athletes safe. Rich Hilliard, relates that he takes pride in making a contribution toward bettering the system and overseeing a fair process. The NCAA is a rich and powerful force in college athletics. They bear a heavy burden in providing fair and just rules, as well as fair and just enforcement of those rules, with the ultimate intention of ensuring fair competition in college sports. The NCAA also is responsible for providing leadership in the effort to improve collegiate sports by developing an ethical environment for fair competition to thrive. With the enormous infusion of money into the NCAA and into collegiate sports generally, we are likely to see more conflicts within the NCAA and more challenges to the NCAA control of collegiate sports.